I'm going to show you why the G.I. Joe Classified Sundown character and figure deserves a place in your collection on this week's Spotlight. I'll reveal just how much potential this hidden gem has with some amazing display and backstory ideas. By the end of this episode, you might just be looking at Sundown in a whole new light. You don't want to miss this one, only at Heroic Nonsense. Let's go. Who didn't love cowboys growing up? Their stoic, weathered, and gritty demeanor, the way they carried an air of quiet menace and a weary confidence of men who had survived too many gunfights, they were incomparable. Well, G.I. Joe has taken that old West cowboy look and feel and has imbued it into a brand new character and figure, one of the first for the classified line. While he's currently been characterized as a bounty hunter on the hunt for Headman, who's being set up as his nemesis in the classified line, which does sound really interesting, I see him more as a lone soldier with his trusty motorcycle, hidden away in the Arizona desert, waiting to get called in for his next mission from General Hawk. That is, if they can convince him to join the fight. And I've come up with some really great displays and build ideas to showcase how great and versatile a figure Sundown actually is. So be sure to stick around until the end. I reckon you won't be disappointed. What can I say? I really love this figure, and I actually think this is one of the best figures released as part of the 2026 Joe Classified lineup. The funny thing is, that wasn't always the case. My initial reaction was somewhat indifferent. Yeah, he seemed cool with what looked to be some really intricate detailing, but I had no idea how I was going to fit him into our collection with that old West cowboy aesthetic, especially as part of an elite military team. It was only after I had started to put together my 360 preview short that I began to realize how much potential he actually had. Once I added in the song Blaze of Glory from the Young Guns 2 soundtrack as the backing track for my short, it all clicked. This was an awesome figure, and the ideas of how he could join our collection started pouring in. It's actually the whole reason I put together this full spotlight of Sundown rather than simply leaving it as a short. I just had to share out this figure and my ideas with you guys. Hopefully, you'll get the same type of inspiration after today's spotlight and decide to make Sundown part of your collection. So let's get right into it. High level, regardless of backstory, Sundown looks great. He's got the cowboy hat, the Clint Eastwood type poncho, his two sidearms, some cowboy boots, and a whole lot of grit. But it's really the intricate detailing that gets you, blending in modern military tech with some Old West style. The bullets on his belt, the buckle, and some of his unique insignias really add to Sundown's look and makes you realize how much thought and care went into creating this character. Nicely designed, realistic looking face with a modern haircut define his head sculpt when he's not wearing his cowboy hat. He also has some really detailed tattoos around his neck, which is really amazing when you think of it. The devs could have left them off, but they didn't. Feels as if there might be some backstory to them as well. You also get a nice view of his gear from the side, plus a better view of the boots, also opting for a mix of old and new, including some spurs. I really like the shade of his uniform as well, reminds me of Clutch a bit. While the designers could have easily ended there, not only did Sundown get a poncho, but he got one with one of the most intricate graphics I've ever seen on a G.I. Joe figure. And while it isn't material based, it sure looks as if it is, adding in some rips and tears, movement, and texture to the mold on top of that amazing Aztec looking design. Some additional details on the side, like a military grade watch and tattoo, with a better look at one of his holsters and piece hanging off the side. Not sure what the Jaguar tattoo signifies, but it does look great. Perhaps we'll get some backstory to it eventually as well. Or even better, we'll be able to create our own along with his neck ones. Not sure what the numbers on the watch mean either. Perhaps it was meant to signify his original release date, and the 12 o'clock represents high noon. Some food for thought. His other arm sports a military-styled arm guard with some more slugs. I mean, if he's going to go in with a sidearm like that, may as well be loaded up with enough bullets to last the fight. The overall way the belts hang is a really great callback to those old-time westerns. I like that charm type feature they added as well. Really, when I said they went all in on design, they went all in. As for accessories, not a huge amount, but perfect for the Sundown character. A battered cowboy hat, two sidearms, an axe, and a knife. Exactly what you'd expect for a character like this. Love the black barrels and the intricate handles, especially for such a small weapon. Only thing I'm disappointed about is that there aren't any holes in the barrels to place these smoke effects in, which would have been perfect for Sundown. I really like the way the axe hangs off his belt as well. I can really imagine him grabbing it, pulling it off his belt, and throwing it at some COBRA troops. One thing I was surprised about was that he didn't come with a larger weapon, so I added one of my own, one of the many extras we have from the various releases, and I think it's key. It's the way I made him work in my mind as part of the Joe team, because when it comes down to actual missions, that poncho and hat are coming off and he's going to have to go in with some serious hardware. And that's a perfect lead into this next part of the spotlight in terms of how Sundown actually compares to other figures in the line. Of course, I had to start with the most obvious comparison, a Wild Bill and Sundown team up, which is such a great pair to showcase. If you're going to have an old time showdown, then this is the way to go for sure, and I'm glad these two look this good together. I'll note here that my Wild Bill is from the HasLab Dragonfly release and not the recent retro cardback release. As for the pistols, I think Sundowns are the better of the two, larger caliber, black, and more realistically painted. As for size, Sundown lines up with the mid-sized figures and is larger than Wild Bill and the likes of, say, Mainframe. I'll spotlight some great action shots with Clutch in a moment, but we'll call out here how great I think these two Joes look together as a team. I just did this one for a bit of fun, comparing the more out there designs based on certain periods of time, like that of the samurai, ninja, and of course, Old West cowboys. I threw in Crystal Ball here because he does somewhat have a period looking style to him as well, more on the vampire mystic side though. I wonder if they'll come up with any other characters representing historical time periods. Here's a fun one. Name a few in the comment section that you'd like to see or that I've missed. Okay, I couldn't wait any longer. I know that was a much quicker comparison section than normal, but truthfully, this is where all the good stuff is at. I'm going to start with my absolute favorite display idea for Sundown and the way we'll be showcasing him in our collection. I've added in a bunch of shots here of this pose so you can get a good look at how I set him up in case you'd like to recreate this look. I don't know what it is about this imagery, but it's my favorite display in our collection. It's so simple yet says so much. As I said earlier, I view Sundown as a lone soldier out in the Arizona desert somewhere, a Special Forces Joe asset that Hawk pulls in for specific types of missions that only Sundown can handle. Whether he willingly takes the mission or not is a different story, but when he's in, he's the best at what he does. And at his side, instead of a horse, is his trusty round motorcycle, always ready to take him to the next mission or to escape away into the desert. I think this setup perfectly encapsulates that feel and world building and looks great to boot. It's a great way to create a story without using any words, and one that can easily be built out with more figures, vehicles, and accessories. I also really like this one of Wild Bill and the Dragonfly coming out to see Sundown, both as a friend and on the orders of General Hawk. You can almost hear Wild Bill with his cool southern drawl trying to convince Sundown to get his gear together and meet him at the Joe base. I don't know, I just really dig this look for Sundown with the Ram and could probably go on and on with more display ideas based off of this one, but I think that might get a bit boring for you guys. So let's start expanding out a bit more and coming up with some other ways to use Sundown in your action shots and displays. And Sundown riding off into the sunset on his bike is such great imagery and a fantastic way to start simple. Like I felt for my pair up of the Ram and Retro Hawk, this just works. I think the Ram is a perfect vehicle for Sundown who looks fantastic riding it with his poncho blowing in the wind. Keeping up with this theme of creating some straight shooting poses for Sundown, I want to further showcase some great ways to set him up before we get into some larger builds. A lot of these are ideas taken from my mind based off of movies with cowboys I remember watching. And some are in fact actual homages to shots of famous Western movies. There are so many dynamic and interesting ways to display Sundown, I guarantee you won't get bored with him. They're actually endless, and while I am showing them in isolation, they are in no way meant to be kept that way. They're really here for you to take and build your own ideas from. And it doesn't take much, to be honest. A sandbag accessory here or there that came with the modular bases, a shotgun from General Hawk, the snake that came with Serpentor, and a Joe vehicle, and you already have a dynamic display that's just waiting to grow. Imagine what you could do once we get the fire from the upcoming HasLab Snowcat. And if you want to take the more military route for Sundown, as I alluded to earlier, grab an extra machine gun, take off his poncho and hat, and replace with the hair accessory. And what you have is a build ready to go with any of your other Joe action shots. Fits right in. Now, if I really want to get creative and can let go of my favorite pose I showed at the start for a second, this is the way I would go next. A shot of Sundown enjoying a cup of coffee at sunrise after having slept in the desert. His hat and poncho draped over the Ram. I grabbed the folded up sleeping bag accessory from the Vamp and Hit and Run's bag to add to the overall look here. The coffee mug is the one that came with crankcase and the Ostriker. Out of all the Joes we have, Sundown seems like he is made for experimenting with. Look at all the accessories I just borrowed from other figures and sets, they all work perfectly. But where it really starts getting fun is when you start adding in other figures and vehicles. In this case, adding in a second Ram with Spirit, who I think works as another great pairing. Spirit being a tracker and perfect companion for small missions. I mean, you can just see them waking up after a cold night in the desert, packing up, and getting ready for the next leg of their mission. In this case, meeting up with Clutch and the Vamp as they prep to take on Cobra, or splitting off from each other at the close of a successful operation and going their separate ways for their own stories. Now this one I just had to include because of how blown away I was by the simplicity of the shot and how much story it tells. You don't need Sundown, just his poncho, some gear, and a cowboy hat hanging off the handles of the motorcycle. Each time I get a new idea, I can't help but think to myself, this is the way I have to go for our display. I'm not sure you can get a more perfect setup to evoke this imagery of a soldier taking a quiet break, soaking in the calmness of the desert. This is just such a great way to use the vamp, Sundown, and his accessories. Again, saying so much with so little. But if you want to create a bit more movement, this is a great way to do it. Clutch having to do some repairs on his vamp, while Sundown takes a much needed break with his bike parked right next to him. I mean, you don't need two people working on a Jeep when one is plenty. Now for a real action-based display, and how I could see General Hawk using Sundown for special missions, with Sundown about to cause some major havoc to a small temporary COBRA outpost for a Rattler unit out in the desert. I placed his hat this time on his knee as he slowly pulls out a knife to take on a ramp rat, another favorite recent release of mine and which you can see a spotlight of right here. Not wanting to take on the whole unit at the same time, good old Sundown here rolls his hat out in front of the ramp rat to get him to come a bit closer. It's a scene we've seen many a time, but works so well here. Or of this one of Sundown carefully taking off his cowboy hat and placing it atop the COBRA crate before he grabs his weapon. Overall, a figure that is obviously just so much fun to come up with ideas for. I actually had a ton more, but realized I'd never get the spotlight out if I continued. However, I did want to showcase one more, which is another favorite of mine on the more dynamic display side. Of Sundown having received his orders from Hawk and showing up at the Joe Air Base as the Joes prep for their next operation. I imagine Sundown having reluctantly been picked up by Clutch at his small ranch-type cabin and driven to the base, the Dragonfly slowly starting up, causing some wind and dust, as Sundown heads on over to Hawk to report in. If you have the space, I think this is a great way to go with tons of options to swap other Joes and vehicles in and out. If you have another idea, we'd love to hear about it in the comments section. Be sure to share it as they're always fun to discuss here. And finally, I had this idea as an afterthought. Rather than Headman being the big bad for Sundown, I thought of Raptor being a perfect foe. I feel he'd also be out in the desert and a fun counterpoint for Sundown. It's also a great way to include Raptor, which so far I've been keeping out on his own. As we start building out the desert team more and more with Dusty, V2, and the Vamp Mark II, and throwing in our Desert Scorpions, I could see us creating a really dynamic desert-based display expanding further on this idea. However you decide to build out your displays using Sundown, I guarantee that you'll love having this character and figure in your collection. Trust me when I say the ideas start flowing once you have him in your hands. I'm not going to spend too much time on the packaging as it's fairly straightforward being a standard size figure release. I will say though that the side art is quite good and wish we could have a wider shot of him in some dusty old saloon, perhaps taking on some dreadnoughts. I do love the back image as well, a perfect fit for Sundown and a great start for generating ideas off of. So that brings us to the end of this Wild West adventure. Hope the spotlight of G.I. Joe Classified Sundown sparks some ideas for your collection and makes you want to go out and get him before he's gone for good. I'm hoping that we'll see some new classified figures and vehicles come in soon, but there's still a ton of G.I. Joe Classified content on this channel in case you need to catch up with the latest and greatest. Thanks for watching, and remember, it's all such heroic nonsense in the end.
Transform!